Well, I was debating whether to start fresh or just show you, kind of jump right into the middle of it. So what I'm going to show you first is the board information that we set up for the state of Virginia. So I'm in one of the test records that we had. And they can enter the total number of board members for their agency, but the rule that Virginia set up was they have to have at least 15 total. So there's validation across this, the whole thing. So if I try to save with less than that, it's going to bark at me. And also the number of seats for a couple of them have to be a third of the total. So it's going to calculate that as well. So when they're entering them, they need to come up with that number. So they're just entering the total, the values, the numbers of seats, and then as they enter actual people, I'm just gonna, it will calculate their vacancies. And the designee, I guess I don't really understand that you could be a designated appointee, or you're there
Maybe they have a
representing somebody.
chair, or treasurer, or secretary, or something like that.
Yeah.
May I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Page appropriate to help out with CSBG Roma stuff? Okay. Sorry. Dan, we haven't met before officially. I'm Lil Dupree, Page's team, but I've worked at the National Partnership for a long time. Anyway,
okay.
And in the agencies. So the designee is, if it is, at least in CSBG, I don't know about in Reporter, but in CSBG terms, that means if an elected official who their bylaws says you must have a county commissioner from each of your 3 counties for your elected seat, if that official doesn't serve, but designates another individual to serve in their place, they meet the 1/3 standard. And that's exactly 1/3 elected or their designees.
Yeah.
A minimum of 1/3 low-income people, and the remainder could be equal 1/3, but it's got to be exactly 1/3 appointed officials or elected officials, a minimum of 1/3 of the low-income sector, and then the remaining third from the community, which can be either of the others, but they have to be the elected officials and the poor.
Okay.
Shutting up now, but that's what it means.
No, thank you. That's great.
So in the state of Maine, I think we have that listed as a proxy. I'm not sure we have designee. I know that designee is in the act, but I think we have it listed as a proxy, even though it's not technically the same thing. I think we've just historically used that language, but this would work.
Okay. And when we can modify the labels.
Would this be modified, Dan, for all agencies or just for the Maine implementation?
We can modify it for just Maine, and because
the rest of them would be confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I was actually in 2 agencies at different points. So.
Oh, okay.
So designate.
When this is an example of the validation, it's gonna tell you when data hasn't been entered correctly, because I had said that there was a designee but didn't list anybody, and that's essentially it. And then one thing that we've added with these is this got a little hairy because it's a test one where we're submitting, approving, and submitting again.
For the board minutes?
This is this is just the roster.
Oh, the submitting the roster.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So it's going to keep a comment in history. So if I the idea would be if you're coming in to make changes, you would put in a description of your change, and so when you submit it, it will it will pop up here with your description, but yeah, it's not going to let me because I changed this. Sorry. There. And so now this gets saved to show, it'll show you the history of everything that you've done on the board roster.
So
throughout the
essentially, it
year.
just creates a footprint of the changes so you can see them without having to remember that there was one of those seats had Joe Smith in it, and then later you took Joe Smith out. You wouldn't have to just remember that. There would be a place to comment about it. That makes sense.
Right. Yep. And then if at the state level you have questions or reject it for some reason, you would put a comment in, and then all of that history is stored for you on the page so that you just have that.
That looks great. Now, I don't want to jump ahead, but the one thing that we attribute a lot to the roster, but also is board attendance. So
Okay.
I just don't want to jump ahead where I do see meeting schedule, but that was really more of my question about in pertaining to this topic, because this looks very self-explanatory. So
yeah. And the meeting schedule is just meant to
put them in.
allow you to put them in so that you can review that and you'd know ahead of time, okay, you guys are scheduled for a good amount of times, or, you know.
Yeah. We have a state statute for ours, so they would have to, maybe we could build in one of those flags. So like they must meet at least 6 times. And so it would be as a good reminder, because we have had some that have tried to reduce down to 5 at times because of whatever, right? Maybe there was 2 snowstorms in a row and we heard that they were canceling, and we said, well, maybe you want to do a virtual one this time because you know this was your 6th one or whatever, right? What have you. And so it would be a good reminder.
Yep, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you. Cool.
Well, and this was just meant to be kind of a placeholder so that you know at the beginning of the year when they plan to be.
Right. Yeah. No, just so that way we knew if it was possible to put it in there.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
And then the board minutes. This is where I talked to Virginia about the attendance, and they didn't want it in there because I think that was something that their agencies were used to having minutes, and they would upload them, and they were fine with just having them upload the minutes, and then they would go and look at who was there. But I do think it's a good idea to store it so then you can report on it and know.
Well, we use it right now because of our federal visit in 2018, where our lack of monitoring on board vacancies and attendance was a highlight. So we have it as part of our reporting that not in one report quarterly, they report the roster, the meeting dates that happened in that, and the attendance. And it's in a grid, so it's actually very easy to see who's been attending and who's not. And we use that as a conversation tool about board effectiveness rather than just filling a seat. They're attending and participating. So we would want to still have board attendance. I don't know what that would look like, but we would still be interested in that.
Yeah. Okay. And the one thing that we're going to change is I'm not certain what they're used to entering for their packet, but it's apparently multiple forms. So we're going to change this to a multiple file uploader that will allow them to do multiple files. Actually, we might do that for the minutes as well. But yeah, that's pretty straightforward. And the other thing that we could add, go ahead.
I was just going to say that would be something that we as a state would also need for at least, especially the packet, to have up multiple forms for the packet. A lot of our agencies use like Dropbox and such like that for theirs. And at this point, as a state agency, we're not allowed to have access to their Dropboxes. So it's unfortunate to them that they still have to dump them all into an email or 5 emails and send them to us. And then we just save them into our own files. But we have talked about, this was actually something that out of direct response to learning how to do the organizational standards. In CSBG Reporter, one of the agencies like, it'd be really great if we could put our minutes in here. And I was like, I agree.
Yeah.
So when Paige brought this up, I was like, we're already interested.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and any ideas you have on enhancing it would be awesome.
Well, so for us, like, it's actually, this would be really great in the sense of uploading minutes and packets and having a footprint of when that's done, because there's a state rule about how soon they have to do that.
Oh, okay.
So in this case, like, and I don't know how it would work. That's not my expertise. But, you know, if they had uploaded the meeting packet and then there was like a date footprint there of when they did it, because there is a state rule and statute about that. So it would at least make it easier for a monitoring standpoint to say, yep, they did it within the time frame type of thing.
Okay. And that's the time frame from the meeting itself to entering?
Yep.
them?
So
Okay.
we're supposed to be sent the board agenda and the meeting packet. I believe it's 5 days prior to the meeting.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually not because our rules were last updated 20 years ago. It's not 5 calendar days or 5 business days. It doesn't say that either one of those words in there. So it's a little open to interpretation. So we are a little lenient on that because we don't really have a leg to stand on right now. We need to update our rules. So 5 business or calendar days is really the, we go with it. As long as it's not, you know, afterwards.
Yeah.
Right now, because but that footprint, that's what we've done with the board attendance, is we tried to make it visually easy for ourselves by the spreadsheet that we use. They literally put in the dates at the top, they put in the X's next to the person, so we can very quickly see of the meetings they've held, who has attended and who hasn't. And so we kind of feel it would be kind of the same with this, is that if we could see the date that they did it, then it would be a quick monitoring checkbox for us.
Okay.
And then it's actually the same with the minutes uploaded is a little less strict. I think that's 15 days from ratification. So there's still a date there, but sometimes ratification's 2 months later because they haven't voted them, right? So
Yeah.
it's more kind of like, then we'd have to go back and actually look at the next meeting's minutes and whatever and check that date. But this one in particular is very much a very hard 5 days.
Okay. Well, yeah, and if they've already entered their meeting schedule, we have that in the system. We could even
Right.
set notifications out to them to remind them. These forms
that's
are
excellent.
due.
Yeah. Reminders are great.
Yeah. And then you're not on the phone.
I could use as many reminders of what to do next to my job as possible.
Yeah. And then the same thing applies here as they're entering any information and entering a comment and submitting it.
So if you enter, is there a space over, is that meeting notes? Okay, so that's a place for them to maybe put some notes about the meeting that they might want us to know.
Right.
And then if we have any notes back, would we put them down at the bottom or would we stick them in the meeting notes section?
You know, I think the idea was that it would be in the bottom, but it's not a bad idea to put it next to the one it's associated to.
I was just saying, we don't have a ton of, well, we do that through email now, right? Like if we have questions, we just email them. And so I'm just thinking about our process and how often do we ask questions? I mean, I think I probably used to ask more questions a couple of years ago than I do now. I feel a little more well-versed about what's going on and such, but it is, I guess it was more just a process question of like, where would we put it if we had one and where would it pop up?
Right now, the idea was that it's in your
there. Okay.
Your comments, and then it would be stored here for history.
All right. And would they get a notification if there's a comment there, or would we have to let them know? Okay, they would. All right. Cool. All right. That works for me, really. I guess until maybe it doesn't. It's one of those things you learn in time, I guess. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. As you
and
use
thinking
it, then
going
things
from
come up too.
being so used to email and tracking emails, it's kind of, you just go with how it works. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, but when you have Slack and email and Dropbox, it's hard to remember where everything is.
Yeah. In this, so I think this is great. If they upload their minutes here, will they have to upload them for the standards purpose, or if they went to the standards to then tag in those minute meetings to a standard, would they also have to press upload there too?
That's a great question. I don't remember where we landed on that because you're not using financials, are you?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
We did that on financials.
I was just thinking that, like, what a great,
Yeah.
if they only had to do it once, and then they could go
Right.
right into the standard, right? And then just tag it into the standard that they, that now meets that standard going forward. But it's not necessarily a deal breaker either.
Yeah.
We're making their life easier as it is, although they don't feel like we are.
But they could use it for multiple standards, right? There's ones that are specific, like enter. I think Virginia went away from the idea of doing it automatically because they wanted them to do it. But I think they just have to go out and associate it. It's not, we have it in
I'm thinking more of it like, if they just have like if it ends up just being in their CSBG reporter Dropbox, if you will, right? And then they can just draw from it when they're doing the organization center. It makes it a one-click upload. And then if it then does mean that it is effective to a standard, they could just go right in there and click it in there. Again, still not a deal breaker, because if they just have to upload it, it's only a few extra clicks, and I don't want to complain about that at all. But that was just a question.
Yep. Because we did something similar in financials for Virginia, because typically you had somebody that just was going in to do financials that would know some of the org standards. So we set those up as they just go in, it's like a one-stop for them. They go in and upload their files, and it automatically puts them into org standards for them, and they don't have to go and dig for them. So we certainly can. And they are, I believe what we did was, once you upload it here, it's available for org standards, and then you just go to the standard and associate it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. That I believe is done.
Okay.
But it isn't going to automatically put it in the ones that we've designated, because they may want to put it other places, and we thought it's.
Yep. And that sounds exactly what we'd want.
Okay.
Absolutely what we'd want.
Okay.
Yep.
Then yeah.
Just as a kind of like I said, like a one upload, right? It's in there now, and they can then whether they decide to do the work after they upload the minutes to this, or a week from now, they could go back in a week from now and know that the minutes are already uploaded, and they go to their standard and and tag it to that, whatever standards it's applicable for.
Okay.
Great.
That's great.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. And then the other thing that Paige and I were talking about was the supplemental budget and reporting.
Yes.
So we ended up just essentially copying the community action program, the financials, and the reporting. The community action plan is just programs for them. And so they can come in and do just like they would for their existing community action plan. And I was going to remove the CMPIs. I don't think those really apply to that supplemental. It's really just services and.
Well, at least in Maine,
are you tracking outcomes?
The feds did propose a module 3 for the annual report, but Maine's not even doing module 3 for regular CSBG, so we are not even dreaming about it for years.
Okay.
Not on our radar. But this one's a little harder for me to wrap my head around, because I know the agencies are also still struggling with wrapping their head around their community action plan and CSBG. But I think mirroring it is good. The only thing about that is that we didn't do targets, because And Paige is shaking her head. So it seems like she's already maybe forethought this already
Yeah.
a little bit, but we didn't do targets. What we basically are using module 4 backwards. We are focusing on the all characteristics report for the who, the services as the what, and then the outcomes if they have it.
Okay.
And so it's just backwards.
So Jamie, on this one though,
Well-
if I remember what, oh God. Okay, yes, it was Maine, and it was a conversation with one of your agencies, and they were saying that, and your email back to me said for CARES, you want the counts differently. You want it per service instead of per unduplicated person. So in the CARES report,
So the agency that you were talking to was not present to the conversation of what we decided about the reporting. So thank you for asking the question and clarifying. We had agencies that expressed concern about not reporting duplicated services during the CARES time because they were afraid that it wouldn't show how much they were doing. So we decided as an agency in that reporting form that we would allow for duplicated reporting to be tracked, but that when it came to actual reporting to regular CSBG and what we're going to send to the feds was to be unduplicated. And so there was an area in that form for both of those. There was half of the agencies that wanted the ability to track duplicated services. There was half the agencies who felt like it was too much work.
so I just pause for 1 second.
Sure.
Just because he's on, because I just, CARES Act reporting here that Dan's kind of showing, and you were talking about, in general, nationally, they do kind of want the numbers of people in some profile that might have been helped by CARES money, however the blank they decide to define that, right? And then services. So in this, if they were tracking, I have to pull it onto a screen where I can see. So go to the reporting part for a second, Dan.
Okay. I was just going to show we don't have targets on this one.
Right.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they didn't have any idea what they were doing. So here, if so we're not passing CARES data to Dan, because to do that would have been sort of silly, and it's a 1-year thing, and the rules, like, it just would have been silly. So we're not passing CARES specific stuff. So if they were going to be putting their data into here in CARES, they can pull it from EmpowOR, and they can look at the number of service units if that's what they want to report, or they can look at the number of people, like either way. But is what you're saying that you wanted it to be okay for them to put mortgage payments, includes emergency mortgage payments, service 4E, right? For them to put in, instead of the number of households, which is what the guidance is for the national report here, to put in the number of payments. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that the agency of which that you were helping probably confused you because they weren't there for the conversation, and they're only looking at the report for what's on there. That we made this report to say two things, because half of our agencies wanted to gather both information. They wanted us as the state office to have a full picture of what they're doing, because we don't only use that data at the federal level, but we also use it at the state level, right? So that agency was not there for that conversation. And when you read that form, and it's your template of training or of tracking and reporting, and you don't understand what the instructions were, and you're asking for help from CSBG reporter and you about how to get there, and them not understanding what the conversation was the problem. So I do want it to be unduplicated. So I don't want it to be payments. I want it to be households.
Even here, if it was CARES specific.
Right.
Okay.
Because that's how we're going to report it federally, is that we're going to go with that federal guidance. It was just that the way that since we've changed the module 4, right? Since it's changed in the last 2 years, the numbers have dropped. The way that they report has dropped.
Correct.
And so we as a state had these performance measures built into our contracts where the performance measures were going to the commissioner's office. So we were sending numbers to the commissioner's office. They're like, well, wait. 2 years ago, they were doing this many people, and now they're doing, and it's like, except
really.
they were doing that many people back then. It's just the reporting format has changed federally, and we're now, so it doesn't give a full picture of how many times they touch a family, right? And that's a problem at the community action level, which I can appreciate. They're doing a lot more work than it looks on paper. And so they wanted a way so it was an understanding between them and us that we have this tool to capture what we need to report federally and also what we want to show as a state. It was federal and state data together.
Do you want, would you have, in your ideal world, Dan, you're going to yell at me. In your ideal world,
Get ready.
if this was CARES and you're looking at it and they're hand entering because they're not getting it from EmpowOR, would you have wanted there to be a households and a number of services, like whatever tool you're talking about that you're asking them to fill out?
Mm-hmm.
Would that have been what you wanted here? No, maybe.
So, and I think I'm breathing for Dan, unfortunately. Sorry. I mean, the answer is yes and no. The answer is that if we're going to rely on CSBG reporter solely, probably yes, because we have used some of that data when asked from the commissioner's office for data. We've chosen to use the duplicated services data because it really shows what we're doing with the money. But at the same time, if I was to be really honest with you about that data and how many times we've touched it and what it might take to put it in here, I would probably be less apt to say, yes, let's put it in here.
Okay.
I don't know. That's a yes or that's not an answer. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Maybe might need to bring it back and unpack that a little bit.
Mostly I wanted to just hear, because, he's sort of showing you this possible supplemental. And I was like, oh, well, if you already have this other tool that you're asking them to fill in, and we're trying to sort of not have that other tool and have it all here, then what would that take?
Right.
Is sort of what I was going to. But I don't even know, Dan. Well, I do know, sort of. I know it wouldn't be nothing to do it.
Well, but is it, so this particular service is tied to what we ultimately do in the fourth quarter reporting.
It's not, though, for you in supplemental and CARES, right?
Right. But, well, depending on what, they haven't really decided how they're going to get the data, right?
No,
I was
they
assuming that
haven't.
they'd follow the same model.
We also don't know what's going to happen based on the comments that have come back from NASCAS or in the comment period. So federally, we don't have this is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Maine made a decision back when we didn't know what we were doing. And it played out in our favor because it seemed that what the feds released as a suggestion, we were on par with. But there's still no resolution as to what we're doing officially. So I would be, as much as I want to move forward to being as streamlined reporting as possible, I'd also be hesitant to make a decision not knowing what we're doing federally or what's required of us federally. Because as of right now, well, up until October, we had some agencies who hadn't even used any CARES money yet.
And
So they were reporting 0.
weren't they supposed to get back to you today or by the end of the month? Wasn't that the?
So 6 o'clock on Friday is usually when they make their deadline. It's usually about 6:30 p.m. after nobody's working. And then they get the email on their phone and everybody panics and works all weekend to try to figure it out. Not speaking from experience. And so I'm hoping for 6:30 today, maybe.
I say that because I'm supposed to be advising people on Tuesday. And I personally am loving that I have no idea what federal is going to say, and I'm going to advise them on Tuesday.
So we really were not off par too far. Like with what we asked and what the feds have brought up has pretty much what we asked of our agencies. I wish I had a that's easy button when that was released. Like I was really dreading it and figuring, and to hear that some agencies weren't even prepared, I'm like, wow, we were for the first time in forever. Cue Frozen. We were a little ahead of the buck. So, yeah. So I don't have an answer. This looks really great, and there's a lot of there's a lot of quality to the duplicated data that we've been gathering. I don't know if there's a way that we could just make it simpler. Like maybe could we just create a form that I don't want to create more work, but like I was like, maybe it's just a form that they go in and dump in their data into and it's submitted, their duplicated data, where it's like simply a form. But at the same time, I don't know what makes sense. That's your expertise. I see.
So they're currently giving you information. Is that true?
So
they're currently giving you this information?
They're currently giving us that information, and then they're currently giving us this information by services instead of by households, because they're giving us what they're actually doing versus taking it down by household numbers.
And is that just for CARES or is that across the board? Just for CARES. Okay.
Yeah, we only check that because of the historical questions that have come down from the commissioner's office and the new way that the feds collect reporting, and we haven't been able to accurately depict what's going on in Maine to the commissioner's office in a way that makes the action agencies comfortable and us, quite frankly. We decided in regards to the CARES, knowing that they were going to be questions about how much have you spent, how many people have you served, and we really wanted a real picture of what that was. So it was just for the CARES. So it'd only be for a very short, for however long we have it.
And it's really services. Like part of me wonders, Dan, if the format of the page is flipped and services is at the top, number one, because they may not even have outcomes, right? And then if it's just an additional, so Jamie, you said a form, it's same. So sure, we could do, never mind, I won't say that because it's not my system, but a column that was labeled unduplicated and a column that was labeled services,
That's how it is now. They actually have the column of unduplicated as actually one column for the quarter, but then they have the duplicated column by month because we were hoping, because we didn't know.
No, don't do that.
No. The only reason why we did that was because at the time we were trying to anticipate the ebbs and flow of like what picture we wanted to tell. And we wanted it to match that if we had this spike in the end of February, that the numbers would show right in March. And so, but it wasn't an expectation. And that's where your email to the specific agency you were talking to made me laugh in a very sinister, psychotic kind of way. Yes. So
Anyway, that's a whole different story, but
there is.
the question is whether or not it's even worth it to you to think about putting it in. Like, I have no idea what level of effort is for Dan to add that to this particular thing,
Yeah.
and whether it's worth it to you to see
I'm
it all
gonna,
in place.
I guess, already talking it out, the answers, no, that we shouldn't.
Never mind.
Like, thank you for the conversation because it made me think about it, but I really think no, just because of the agencies that were reporting it, they're tracking it for their own purpose. They're pulling it together, and the questions from the commissioner's office has really subsided because we're, as a state, we obviously are in much understanding of what's going on. And, you know, back in March and April and May, when we were making drastic decisions and trying to anticipate what was going to happen and such, it's just different. So
then, in terms of this reporting, so we have the community action plan, we have the progress reporting, and financials. And Dan, I don't know that they've seen financials at all because they're not using it yet. So would you use that for the CARES Act stuff or not?
So I haven't seen it. I don't know if you're asking me or Dan.
You.
Okay. I haven't seen it. I haven't decided if it would be helpful only because we have an internal robust kind of financial reporting we get every Monday that's automated out of the system that our accountants use that basically tells us from the prior week what has been charged to what line and where we're at and what's left. So we get that every Monday, but it does come from an outside, not from our agency, an email to us. So I don't know what efficiency it would bring us to have to then enter into here at this time. That if it was something that was more, as some state agencies have financial people in their community services area, and they're kind of more in control of that as a program, I would probably say yes. But you know, our contract process is part of a completely different department, and they're in charge of our contracts. And then, you know, our budgeting and everything is all part of. So we're just really far removed. Although we still ultimately oversee that report every single Monday. We would have to, the agencies would have to enter it and we would have to enter it. And I think that it might not be efficient at this time, unfortunately, but it would have been a really, I think there's a lot of quality to it. I just would have to really think about how we do it, like what it would mean for us process wise and what it would mean for the agencies. Because is this tied to what the agencies do for financial reporting?
Yeah, so what I'm showing you here is from the agency's perspective. So this one was the agency had submitted the supplemental budget, and then each.
So it might be. So this is how Maine is set up. The agencies get a 1/12 payment, and every quarter it's trued up with financial reports that they send to the division, to our financial division. That if they then have more expenses than they were given, the next payment is adjusted, or if they didn't spend as much as they were given, the next payment is adjusted. We've been doing that historically for a long time, and not until now have I been for changing that process until we're behind on spending and we're having a hard time tracking how much of each grant we have left. So we are now thinking about embarking on a reimbursement model, and that might be when doing the finances would make sense.
Okay.
But that's something that we've literally just had an epiphany about. So we're just starting that conversation before we even start thinking about 10-1 contracts. But I think that would make sense maybe when we get there.
Okay. That one was, oops. The one I was showing you was specific to the CARES Act supplemental tracking for Virginia. The way that they've got it for their regular budgets, the agencies will put in their budget for the year. They track TANF. I don't know if you're doing that as well.
No,
that
we are
gets kind of
very
goofy because it ends up. That would be great if you don't.
Yeah, no, we are very strictly CSBG in our program.
Okay. Okay.
No heat, no
Um,
head start, nothing.
Oops. Excuse me. And then so as they're putting their numbers in for, obviously this is, the budget shouldn't be $15, but
Be concerned.
so it'll mark up the page for them to tell them that they're 10% over or over 10% over, and these thresholds we can adjust if you have different needs. So this is their monthly expense reports. And then when they complete the year, if they have money left over in their budget, the following year when they actually set their budget first and then they do a budget modification, because typically they have to submit their budget before they have entered their last expense report. So once their last expense report is in, they do a budget modification, and if there's money carried over, they can assign it wherever they want, and then that money's used first, and then the money that they've been budgeted, and so it just keeps track of what they're at year to date for expenses, and then how much is remaining in each for their
Great. I do
so
think
yeah,
that
if you get to a reimbursement model,
I think that would make sense then. I'm really hoping we do, because when I came into this position, we had a PFO that had been in our agency for a couple of years and then stayed for a couple of years, and he went to a much higher paid position in the middle of the pandemic, and I tried to bribe him with lots of chocolate and adult beverages to come back, because he understood our formula, and it's getting really hard to track where we are financially.
yeah.
With 2 grants running that have balances and our formula. So our new PFO and I have spent hours trying to come to an agreement, and we're not there. So,
Okay.
but I think being when we consider that this will be a reality, I think it'll be really good too for agencies to track where they're at. And they could always just true up with us, right? If we could build it in that they true up with us to see if we're in agreement with where they're at.
Yeah. I don't know how Virginia does it, if they require a budget modification, if they've gone over, they have to adjust and move money around, or I think they actually just let it go as long as they're not over in total.
Yeah, we allow 10%. 10% of the total contract can be moved around from lines that already have amounts on them. If they're trying to move them to a budget line that's allowable in DHHS, but that they didn't originally budget some money on, then they have to do like a full budget, like amendment through our full contract process. But if it's something that like they're moving from salary to rent or travel or whatever, as long as it's within 10% of that full amount, that's okay. So that's also just changed too. So we had a lot of changes this year.
Yeah.
I think my network used to like me.
One thing we discovered.
Don't think
You're a doer. One thing with the budget modifications that came up for Virginia is, after time, they're like, well, this is what the current budget is. And we store the budget modifications, but they want to know, what did they say at the beginning of the year? I don't even remember where they started. So we're going to change the budget modification page to show like when it changed and what it was historically, just so that they can track that, because that's become a bit of a problem for a couple of their agencies. I had one more thing, if you have a second.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got time.
On the on the community action plan, we just added the Roma implementer because they've got to put in a plan at the beginning of the year. So that's why this page is under the community action plan. So obviously I got really detailed in my example. But your Roma implementer would put in the plan for each quarter, and then they can upload documents. And actually, this one I probably should have backed out. It starts out with first quarter showing, and they would enter that and submit it, and then anything that they add as a file is associated to the quarter in which they submitted. But all that documentation remains here until they've done all of their quarterly plans, and the same history remains.
So we don't, the only thing, when you go back to their work plan, is that only tied to their targets, or is there places in there? So it looks like you have needs, gaps and linkages, and strategic goals, programs. So they actually haven't used, they have not put in their community action plan in
No.
CSBG reporter. So I guess I haven't also I have not navigated through those sections. Do you mind clicking on them each so I could see them?
Sure.
Thank you.
So you can either update the existing ones or add.
Okay.
And then it assigns it a need number,
Okay.
assuming that each locality can have up to 4 needs.
Okay.
And so they would submit each of these, and really the gaps and strategic goals are pretty much the same kind of format. Gaps doesn't, I don't think that gets linked anywhere.
So this page mirrors kind of our narrative community action plan more. Because our community action plan really is about the program or the gap that they're looking to address, and then the programs that are going to address it, and then the FNPIs that are tied to that. And then they have a kind of a financial page where they're going to, then they determine how much of their money they're going to put in each domain. So this page kind of mirrors more of the document that we have for their CAP plan, separate from the needs, and then I'm assuming probably even including the strategic goals. They actually kind of really depict all those out onto one page. So do you mind clicking on strategic goals just so I can see what boxes are there? Okay. So is this where they're putting in their actual strategic plan goals, or for the CAP plan?
For the CAP plan.
Okay.
And then, Jamie, these things get associated at the program level. So we talked about, you guys had already gone through your application process for this year, so it didn't make any sense, but looking at it for next year. And so what we did as the starting point was we pushed all the programs over with the outcomes. And so they're just doing the targets, but all the rest of this, so let's go back up slightly, Dan. So wait, which program are we in? I missed.
Head Start. This is in my test agency.
So in the program of Head Start, right, then you can select the outcome and put your target. Well, that's the part they've looked at and done. We haven't done anything yet with the rest of this stuff.
Right. Okay. So, okay. I think it would be great if we could get away from any reporting and or forms and such that we have in their contract and put it in CSBG reporter. I think that would be phenomenal, especially programmatically, because some of the other reports that they do for our, our finance division and such like that, that's theirs. They own that. But state program wise, it would be great, because I can't tell you how many times that it comes in, we make sure we save it, so then that way we make sure we have that, it's saved for historical documentation. We try to keep track of all the emails, but between 10 agencies and then 10 forms that have 10 tabs, we really kind of get lost in where we're at sometimes. So it'd be nice to, the agencies just have one place to go to do it all. So I would definitely be interested as a state office to really partake in every category that we can that makes sense. It would just be how we're going to do it for Maine. Because I do think that some of it, what's already here, we could mold it to what we need, rather than maybe making you completely mold to where we're at. It would just be I think Paige can appreciate this. Our network gets really, really nervous about, it is not just the change, it's that the outcome isn't perfect yet. And I can't say it enough that the first outcome does not need to be perfect, but we need to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think this looks great. I think that we are interested. I think it's in our budget. So that's kind of the only other thing is I need to talk to Megan about. It was in our budget for the last 3 years, and I think MECAP took it off their budget this past year because they thought we were going to already have it. And so I just want to make sure that we have what we need for that. And I think we do because we are still spending last year's grant. So, but I have to look at their budget categories and then obviously see what it will cost because we haven't dipped into their portion of our portion of the EmpowOR budget in a long time.
So it sounds like in terms of looking, there might be 2 or 3 categories of next steps that one, well, maybe not, but the board stuff in particular, maybe soon.
Mhm.
The way to use the community action plan and whether or not you use the financials might be more thinking about your next year's applications.
Correct.
So, and then you just need to make some decisions about the CARES Act. And I think you can do that once you know what federal is doing and whatever, right? So your application process for the agencies, when does that start? When does that really start?
So they are required to send us a draft of their work plan and their budget in June. And that is because that is when the contracting process starts for October 1. And historically before my time of having power to make changes, we were getting their budgets and approving them before we were getting their cap plan. So I was having to approve their budget financially for our own state process before I even know what they were projecting or proposing to do with the money. Made so much sense. So we asked them, what is the earliest / latest date? What date is too early, which is relative. But what is the closest to our contracting period that we could get that you could at least get us a draft? And that's not meaning that it couldn't change, just that we need to have a narrative, an idea that when your budget comes in, we know what we're looking at. And so, so June, it's either June 1 or June 30.
So we have a little time, but not a lot of time.
Correct.
In terms of, because we were behind the 8 ball in terms of training them because, so it's not too early is sort of that to start thinking through this a little bit more and thinking about
So
how might they use it, right?
I know I've shared our community action plan document with you, but is that where we start? Is that like, I know that I've sent it before, but I can resend it again. And then kind of, I would think I would probably need some help kind of depicting where, if we were to just use this as it is, where each part would exist, right?
Mhm.
Because you know where it's kind of mapped together, where they tie together on the back end.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't be opposed to keeping it as close to what it is. But I just need to be able to be able to train on it as well outside of you, like as a state office, be able to back up what you're training in those moments of, well, this doesn't make sense and I don't want to do it this way. And I don't want to call Paige and tell her I'm having a hard time because that's happens. And so
Really? I'm so mean. I'm so mean, right?
well, sometimes the agencies have this I don't know where they get this understanding that I seem to know what you're talking about your job. And so they asked me for like, well, what do you think? Why is it, why does it work? And I'm like, listen, I don't use this system. And I
Yeah.
also haven't thought about this or these NPIs or these outcomes or how you report ever, right? Like I am the end person and I understand what it says. So I'm not the person to ask. I very kindly have just a nice, very generic response. But I think that
I think
I would
if
need some help depicting kind of like where each would go.
Yeah, so if you resend that
Mhm.
plan and then let's see if we can, and think about by when would you make a determination on financials, because that would be an additional piece, right? And Dan's gonna have to get back and anyway, there are follow-up action items. It seems like there's probably at least 3 buckets of them. I'll write a quick email and see where we go from here. And I know I probably need to jump off here, which doesn't mean you guys can't continue to talk. Oh, it might mean
I
that.
actually have to go too. Yeah. Oh, you did. Yeah, you're running the meeting.
Yeah, that's no problem. I thank you for that, Paige. I think that will be great. I appreciate your time today. This has been wonderful and
Yeah, good.
looking forward to what the next step is.
Absolutely. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Have
weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.